What is the main concern for Washington?
I think the main concern is that, this individual, Elon Musk, one of the world's richest people, if not, the richest man in the world, depending on the valuation of his companies at any given
day, yes.
He's amassed sort of a portfolio of companies and interests that not only are interesting from their technical perspective, but also because they intersect with important parts of government policy. So you have Tesla, electric vehicles, that's obviously a big priority for the Biden administration. You have SpaceX and Starlink, satellites in Ukraine, satellite communications in Ukraine. And you have Twitter now, which is, could be a platform for free speech. It could also be a platform for disinformation, depending on how you see it. So he's sort of intersecting with a lot of these really important parts of American public life. And he's kind of mercurial. He's sort of this individual who does what he wants to do, says what he wants to say, invests in what he wants to invest in, or may not want to invest in at the time, depending on what sort of restrictions or investigations he's under. And I think this sort of makes the administration and other U.S. officials nervous because he's somebody who can sort of cross borders, cross interests around the world, and there's really no way to sort of regulate him or rein him in if he gets kind of depending on what his opinions and his options are, because he has at one point he had a security clearance, he may still. Right. So he has his sort of interests in a lot of different areas.
You talk about one U.S. official described Tesla as a Chinese company with an American subsidiary.
Right.
It's a little bit of a joke there, but it really gets to one of the matters at hand here, and that's his relationship with foreign governments. A bigger issue when you consider not only Tesla, but to your point, Starlink, what we've seen go on here, the interdependency between Musk and the administration, the U.S. government. How concerned are they about him being compromised by foreign entities?
Well, you mentioned Starlink. I mean, I think that's one of the main sort of, intersections of his, private interests with the public interest in Ukraine. So, he provides a lot of the satellite communications that the Ukrainian military and officials are using to communicate on the battlefield. But he has, somewhat unilateral control over that. He can, he said some controversial stuff about how that should be paid for, who should pay for it, whether it should be cut off. So that exposes kind of a vulnerability to U.S. foreign policy or U.S. public policy there. And on Tesla and Twitter and some of these other platforms that companies and platforms that he's brought together under one sort of roof, he has some foreign investment in Twitter. He has some foreign interests with Tesla. And that's one of the kind of mechanisms that the U.S. government can occasionally use to look at national security interests when it comes to private individuals. But it's a little bit tricky there because, this is a private individual who's, entitled to go out and get investments from wherever he sees fit. So the government has to be kind of careful about how they look at that. And so they've done everything basically by the book. And part of the challenge is that doing things by the book doesn't leave you, rightfully so perhaps, a lot of options to work with this situation if you're concerned.
But for Twitter, it's not just some foreign investments. I mean, it's Prince Alawite, it's Chao-Pen Go, the CEO of Binance, and it's the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund. At some point, is this going to raise flags in the CFIUS world, Saleha?
So it has raised flags. Anne-Marie, we reported back in November that the Biden administration, through CFIUS, is wondering, can we do a review? So they were reviewing whether there could be a review. And that's because when an American citizen buys a company, there's no national security risk. But his consortium to put together $44 billion to do that hostile takeover of Twitter included foreign nationals from countries that the U.S. is not particularly friendly with at all on all fronts. And so based on that, there was a review. And then in recent months, we've been able to report that they ruled out the legality of being able to do that kind of review, which is why we wrote the story. As when Dan and I got together and thought, what can we report on what the tools that the U.S. government actually has as they play whack-a-mole with this man who has all these, tentacles in different parts of the government. Right.